Hello, hello, hello. This is Danny Ceballos with the Best Boss Podcast. Greetings, dear listener. Or if you're seeing us on YouTube, welcome to you too. We're so excited to have you join us for a conversation around change management in your organization, working with individuals on how they process and can work with change. Excited to welcome my guest, Rick Maurer. Rick, so good to have you here. Just say hi.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Rick, and then we're going to get right into it. So Rick Maurer works with leaders who see big change projects as opportunities to engage people in the changes that will affect them. These leaders know that change can actually boost morale and commitment to the organization and the work. He calls his approach change without migraines. His opinion has been sought by NBC Nightly News, CNBC, Fortune, the Wall Street Journal, and many trade and business publications. Rick's impact spans an impressive range of organizations, including Lockheed Martin, Verizon, Deloitte Consulting, Charles Schwab, Sandia National Labs, Tulane Medical Center, the International Monetary Fund, and the government of Guyana. His experience is global. He's worked on site in 14 countries and collaborated virtually with leaders in various other nations. His books include Beyond the Wall of Resistance, Why Don't You Want What I Want, and a feedback toolkit. In 2020, he helped his friend Carl Berger write The Music Mind Experience. His most recent book is Seizing Moments of Possibility. Rick, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to dig deep into, how you think about change and how you work with your clients on change. As you know, listening audience for this podcast is our senior and executive leaders in organizations across sectors. So maybe tell us a little bit more about what brought you to this work and what keeps motivating you to do this kind of work.
Yeah. Well, my training is in the field of organization development, which is the human part of organizations. And in the early 90s, some of my clients started saying, I'm getting a lot of resistance to change. And suddenly that was kind of the running commentary, resistance to change. And they would follow that with, what should we do? And so I started looking for resources, and there wasn't much out there. In fact, one book on resistance to change said it's it's a tit for tat exchange. Hey, I'll do this for you today if you'll do that for me tomorrow. I mean, that's kind of, hey, if you'll fill in for me for this, I'll do that kind of thing for you. That kind of, back and forth is just human, how we work as humans. And that's okay. But I thought, but it's not getting at really why people resist. It's not just that they don't have time to go to that meeting quite often. And so I really started looking around and reading whatever I could, but trying to observe a lot. And what I found is that we were treating resistance all wrong. In fact, we were talking when I was writing the book Beyond the Wall of Resistance. The copy editor, the person who goes through to make sentences make sense, would keep taking out when I would say resistance da 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 da, and they would say resistor. And I'm thinking, no, there are no born resistors. Resistance happens in the dance between you and me.
Huh.
People aren't getting out of bed and going, oh, how can I mess up Danny's life today? I mean, maybe there are a couple people like that, but for the most part, they're not there. But something happens in that relationship between you and me, or my relationship with the entire organization. And so as I looked further, I ended up one night had writer's block, and I like writer's block because it means something's going on. And I just went over to kind of a favorite place of mine, and I think I got a beer, but it was only one beer, so I wasn't alcohol had nothing to do with the story. And I just started jotting stuff down, and I don't know why, but I thought, oh, I think there are three levels, and they I've gotten clearer about them over the years, but they're basically level one is the easiest one, level three is the hardest one, and they're all alive all the time together. So it isn't like you go through one and check it off and go to the next one. But here's when it's resistance. Here's how to remember those. Level one is I don't get it. I don't understand what you're saying. Level two is I don't like it. And this is an emotional reaction based on fear. I'm afraid. This is a big deal. And it's especially a big deal in organizations because people often don't talk about or are encouraged not to talk about fear. You know, so you're running a meeting and saying, so what do you think? Oh yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. And people are going, my God, what's going to happen to me? Okay, so I don't get it. I don't like it. The level three is I don't like you. And what that means is I don't have trust and confidence in you for something like this. And and we tend to spend our time in meetings doing a lot with level one, making sure people understand the stuff. So we do slides and we come up with models. All of that can be good, but it often misses the fear and the lack of trust. And so
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
what I work with. And by the way, there's a positive side to all that too. If you just think of it as energy, there's that energy on the resistance side, but there's also can be energy on the positive side. And so people get it. They like it. They're leaning in and maybe and they say, "Hey, and I trust this person. I don't
Hmm.
quite understand it yet, but I trust them." And so all of that is going on all the time in that dance. And it's in our best interest to be paying attention to that all the time.
That's a lot. That's a big dashboard, huh? So I'm wondering. So first of all, it's occurring to me. One of my favorite quotes is by Peter Senge, who said, "People don't resist change; they resist being changed."
Yes.
Right, and for me, the three levels that you just talked about kind of speak to what is why are they resistant to change. So what do leaders do? Let's say a leader is going through is bringing a change to their organization. Let's say it's a big change. Let's say
Yeah.
it's a merger acquisition kind of change. So there's going to a whole bunch of culture stuff that's going on. How can a leader track those three levels, or is it a diagnosis of which level is strong? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's actually easier than it sounds. Here's something that I do. It's very simple. I was working in a healthcare organization. They were about to go through a big change, and I think they were acquiring another group or something. And I'm working with the change management people, and they're talking about this one group, and they're going, "Oh man, they're resistors. Oh man, they're going to be this," and you could just hear all this negative stuff. And they said, "What should we do?" And there was a big whiteboard there, ran across the room. And I got up and I just drew a long horizontal line. And I said, okay, over here on this one side, that's strong support. You know, that's what you're looking for. And way over on the other side is very strong resistance and opposition. Okay. So what kind of support are you going to need? I mean, maybe you need them to be all the way up there, or maybe you don't need quite that. But what do you need? And they could identify that. And I said, well, what kind of energy are you expecting to get? Oh, and then they start telling me all this stuff going on. And what they're telling me was level one, level two, and level three.
Right, right, right.
So they didn't have to go, well, let's do a survey of level three issues. It's not that complicated. I was working in an organization that was doing business process engineering, which re-engineering, which used to be very, very controversial. And these people said, and I was just there to teach, and they said, "Oh man, next week the bomb is going to drop." And I go, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Oh, we're rolling out our first draft of our plan to the key stakeholders. Oh, they're going to hate it, and then they're going to hate us. Blah 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 blah." And then, like puppy dogs, they said, "What should we do?" And I mean, I heard about that problem. It's just like you just heard about it. It was the first time. And I said, well, so what's going on? And they said, and they started saying, oh, they would keep going about the bloodbath and all this terrible stuff. And I said, wait a minute. And I'm making this up as I go along because I needed more information. They're asking for an answer and I needed data. And I
Yes.
said, hey, there's about 15 people in the room. And I said, does everybody here know somebody that's going to be coming to that meeting? And I goes, yeah. And I said, you don't have to give them a name. Don't say their name. What's going to be on their minds? And at this point, I'm fishing for information. And they started yelling the stuff at me. And there's a flip chart, and I'm writing as fast as I possibly could. And as I'm writing these words and phrases down, I realized what to do with it. And I said, hey, I just taught you those three levels. Let me use a green marker. Which of these are level one? And by the way, everything on their list was negative. Normally I find a balance, but this was all negative. And I said, okay, which of these have to do with lack of understanding? And I underlined. Which of these have to do with fear? I underlined with a different color, and then lack of trust. When we looked at the list, maybe 10% had to do with lack of understanding.
Hmm.
Everything else was lack of trust
Hmm.
or lack of, a fear or lack of trust. And one of the people in the room said, oh, that's why the bomb is going to drop. And people looked at him and said, what are you talking about? He said, we designed that 8-hour meeting to deal with level one stuff, timelines, deliverables. And, and they said, obviously that's important. What we're missing is that they're scared and they don't trust us. And here's what they did brilliantly. This is all right now. I've described about 10 minutes worth of time in a meeting. And here's what they did brilliantly. They said, could we take the next hour and redesign that meeting? And my colleague and I said, yeah, go ahead. And they turned their chairs around. They didn't call on us. They didn't say, well, Rick, you must have a model that you could use, and they came up with a way of doing the meeting that was, they still covered the stuff, but in a way that was much more respectful of the people in the room.
I love
So it
that.
wasn't some magic thing. They didn't have to take training in doing it. And when I called them the next week, they said, oh, it went really well. It's not like 100% of the people were with us, but we got people who are on our side who wouldn't have been there before. Some people are really excited about it.
Huh.
That gives me hope. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be as complicated as we often make it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I'm guessing I would think that would happen in most organizations too, with most change efforts, that we concentrate on the on the crossing the T's and dotting the I's and making sure everybody understands that without kind of getting into what's really going on internally. So that's actually a great model, right? So this idea of so for folks that are listening that are about to go through change or whatever, is to really think through, what do you know about your people? You can make some guesses, you can make some predictions. Rick, I'm also thinking about a bell curve that I'm familiar with that says, how people's general adaptability to change. And there's the early adopters,
Right.
I forgot, the conservatives and the laggards, right? And it's a bell curve, right? And so, I always tell folks, you don't want to concentrate on the laggards because they're not coming with you. The early adopters are already with you. You want to concentrate on the middle section. What are your thoughts about that? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's good. Everett Rogers wrote about that in the diffusion of innovation a number of years ago. I think if you're looking at broad groups of people, I think you're going to find that bell curve thing. But I think we can also use it as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Danny, the reason they didn't go along is we've got a lot of laggards in that. There are places where they're not getting much resistance because it's so clear to people why the thing is important, what it's going to do, how they're going to be involved. And so you're not going to get nearly as many laggards, and you're going to get a lot of people who are in that middle part already moved up to the higher end because you're doing things differently. So it's not a fait accompli
Mm-hmm.
that it's going to come out that way. I mean,
It's a really
I've
good
seen
point.
people lead change well, that a lot of people are with it. Do I have
Mm-hmm.
time for a quick story?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So about, I don't know, 20 years ago, there was a lot of change in healthcare in the United States. For-profit healthcare was coming in, all of that.
Yes.
And I was working in this one little hospital. It was a church-related hospital. And I was talking to the CEO, and I said, there's all this resistance out there in healthcare organizations now. I mean, but here, I'm not getting it. People seem to be productive and seem to be doing well, and people are getting better. And he said, yeah, I would agree with you. And I said, well, why? I mean, is there some, you know, magical potion? He said,
Right.
no. He said, there's a couple of things we do. He said, we give everybody associated with the hospital, whether they're a surgeon or administrator or they draw blood, we give them a 1-page quarterly report. And all it is 3 graphs. And it shows how we're doing over time with patient outcomes, percentage of people who get better. And so you can imagine that over time. And
Mm-hmm.
then we're part of a 12 hospital system. How do we compare with the other hospitals? And then
Mm-hmm.
there's Gallup survey data. How do we compare nationally? And then let's see this. I remember the third one, which was financial performance. Oh, the middle one's a really interesting one. It has to do with, I can't remember the exact wording, but patient care. Do I feel like I was taken good care of? So even though they got better, some people would say, no, it was terrible.
Right.
But sometimes they didn't get better, but they would say, yeah, I was treated well. I was treated with respect and dignity. And so they measured all of those. And he said every once in a while we would have a bullet point or two, but that was it. And what he said, and we just wanted to keep people informed, but here's the thing about that, getting away from the bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
People started coming to me, the CEO, saying, hey, we're concerned that our patient satisfaction scores are going down. And we got curious about that. We were wondering why, and we think we figured it out. And we got a suggestion. Would you like to hear it?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
he said, I'm not a fool. Yeah, tell me about it. He said, so a lot of the changes have been initiated by the folks
Yeah,
out there
yeah.
in the thing. And they're but before we might have looked at those as the laggards, you know.
Right,
Uh,
right.
so,
Yeah, good point. Really good point. Yeah, I think thank you. That's a really excellent reframing. And to your point of there's opportunity with these change efforts. And I'm hearing opportunity to engage folks in ways that they haven't been engaged before, right? To
yeah.
maybe to co-create with them. Any thoughts on, yeah, what can we do? What can we do before the change to kind of ready ourselves as an organization? Even
This will
before we
take
know there's a change, maybe, I'm also thinking, what do we do with our leadership pipeline? What do we do as an organization to have a better culture for navigating change?
well, how you do it really depends on what you're comfortable with. I'm going to get specific here, but like some people could get up in front of a group of 100 people and say, "So what's up?" and and people would know that they could speak candidly, and this person could handle it. Okay, that's not most of us, that do that. But if you've got that skill and people trust you, that's a great way to find out. You
Okay.
know,
Okay.
okay. But that's really simple. The other would be, I really like focus groups, and focus groups that you do not come in with a big agenda. That you might say, hey,
Mhm.
I it's a change is going on, or whatever, just regular stuff. What's working, what isn't working with regard, and have a few prompts.
Mhm.
Don't come in with 20 questions, but come in with
Okay.
just two or three things. And the best thing you can do once you ask the question is shut up.
Right. Right.
And then the next best thing is to build on what they're saying, is to say, oh, so Danny, you're saying blah, 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 blah. So you walk out of that understanding where they are.
Mhm.
You're not trying to solve a problem there, or tell them why they're wrong. All you're trying to do, because that then it shifts everything to you, and people start to going, oh, she didn't want to listen anyhow. Yeah. But those kind of focus groups, I think, can be very, very helpful. You can do surveys. I'm not against surveys, but they take a long time. And I've seen people. I remember I did a survey with a chemical company one time. I was so proud of it. If I'd been in grad school, I would have gotten an A. But out there, and that's not the end of the story. But out there with people making their living at this, it was not. It did not go over well. And they said, people said that on ability to communicate, we're at 3.74. I don't think that's right. I think we're more at a 4.2. I mean, just garbage.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was easy to just dismiss numbers,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. So can I say one more thing?
Sure. Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
That same place that was having those reactions, I said, I went out and was talking to people on the floor. And I said, I asked them about the safety programs that you have on. And I know that's really important. And this is a chemical plant. And so I said, so I was out, and I'm not going to tell you where I was, but I was out and I was talking to a group, and they were all hanging around. People were leaning up against the tanks and that. And I said, so what's going on with this safety program? And a guy looked at me and said, things are going to go boom. But this was real boom. This wasn't like the metaphorical. And I said, what do you mean boom? And he looked at me like I was an idiot. And he said, you see those tanks? One spark
Yeah.
would ignite things. This building would be gone.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by boom.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, do you tell your supervisors? And they said, all the time. So I'm working with the executives. And I said, and I did not put it on PowerPoint. I wrote it on a flip chart. And they said, things are going to go boom. And you could see the executives where they'd just blown off all that survey data. They went, whoa. And the general manager said, that's really important. Thank you, Rick.
Mm,
I mean,
mm,
so I
mhm,
really want people's stories. I want those kind
mhm,
of things are going to go boom stories, or
mhm,
the excitement
mhm.
stories. It brings it to life for us and
Yeah.
for the other people.
Yeah, I love that. And I have to say, I'm about two-thirds of the way through Oppenheimer.
Oh yeah,
And it's all about things going boom and being not to make light of it, but it's you're bringing me back there. So what I'm hearing you say, almost as a bottom line, is, because I'm thinking, well, when do you do this in time in change management timeline? The focus groups, and I'm hearing you say, it doesn't matter when you do it. I mean, ideally, I guess, earlier the better, but it could be right in the middle of the change. But that this bottom line is that this is so much. Get out of your heads, folks. Right. So when you're putting it on paper, that's one thing. That's great. But when we're actually doing this, when we're managing it, it is about it's about the stories. It's about the individuals. It's about
yeah,
recognizing, you know, what motivates us and what does all those kinds of things. And leaders to pay attention to that.
yeah.
Right? Yeah, and ideally it's close to a face to face and a honest, authentic, here's what's going on for me, here's what I'm worried about, here's what I'm afraid is going to go boom kind of conversations. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
And by the way, there's one other thing that can be really helpful. And if if you're comfortable, I'm talking to your listeners now, if
Mm,
you're comfortable with this, just that notion of management by wandering around, which is a
yeah.
phrase that Peterson Waterman came up with.
Yeah.
And you don't wander around with an agenda.
Huh.
You just
Right.
wander around. And, if they,
That's a
you know,
really good point. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
maybe the first time you're not going to get much.
Yeah.
But if
Right.
you start doing that some, there's going to be some people who are going to start talking.
Yeah.
And, and it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
it's anecdotal data, but it's data. You can now find out, was it just that one person?
Interesting. Yeah. Right.
Or is it,
Yeah.
and so now people know, hey, they're listening.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that gives a whole different tone to the conversation,
Well,
that
and
they
it kind of
know that they're being
doesn't
heard.
kind of reverse engineer the three levels. So the more I see you, and the more I like you, the more I like you, the more I like it, or I go with you and trust you, and the more that, then the more I get it. And that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
I had not thought of reverse engineering, but I like that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
I like it so much. I'm going to use it even without attribution. I'm just going to,
That's fine.
no, no, Danny, I really like that. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. And you're reminding me the importance of MBWA is what we used to call it, right? MBWA. And I thought it was Sam Walton who started that, but I think who did you say was it?
Well,
Management.
it was in the book In Search of Excellence, which was the first really big
Yes,
bestseller. But
yes.
they went out and talked to that came from some organization. It
Yeah,
very well could have come from Sam Walton's
yeah.
organization.
Something like that with a wall. There was a wall in there someplace. Okay, so as we're kind of finishing up here, I want to hear, careful, careful people. These are some of the things that can go wrong with change management if you're not careful. I mean, we've hit on some of those, right? To keep it all in your head, to keep it all on paper, that's probably not a good idea. And I think, don't you have a story about Dave? Something with Dave?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Dave was the head of a division, and he was a very technical guy. He was an engineer, and he didn't have a lot of skills, kind of in the human part of stuff. He's a great guy,
Right,
but
right.
he brought me in because he thought, that I'd be paying attention to that and I could help him. And we just had, I would come in and work in meetings and that, but he also knew you could call me anytime. And, I mentioned earlier the level 1, 2, and 3. One morning he called me, he said, Rick, you got a minute?
Huh.
And I go, yeah. And he said, I got a level 3 issue. That's lack of trust. And I said, level 3? And he said, yep. The head of the union hates me. I hate him. And what, I mean, we're both laughing, but we also know it's really serious. And
Sure.
just by saying it's level 3, within a minute, we're talking about
Hmm.
trust, lack of trust, fear, betrayal. I mean, stuff that could have taken us the whole hour to get to. And right away, it's like there was a category for it. Like, oh, okay, the elevator got off at level 3. Great. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about.
Sure.
And we had a great conversation. And you could just you can almost hear his voice get lighter
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
as it went on. So,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, again, it kind of brings it back to get out of the technical and get into the human, right? So, which is from an OD perspective, right? That's what I operate with too, right? Is that the social system is more important or just as important in an organization as all the technical systems. Rick,
can
I
I
know
tell one
you're
more story or not?
say again?
Could I tell one more story or not?
Yeah, 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 please.
Okay, all right.
Love your
You can
stories.
always cut it out.
Hmm.
Okay, here's the way I like to look at doing the change management stuff, because often the human part is considered a separate thing. Okay, now we're doing all the stuff, and then on Friday afternoon we'll have pizza,
Right, right, right.
or once we get to this point, we'll get people involved. And I think that's really risky. The way I like to look at it is it's like a barista. I have a coffee shop I go to, and I get in line, and invariably there's somebody there who orders a latte. And never once have I heard that person go, give me a latte, but hold the milk,
Right,
because you can't do that.
right.
Espresso and steamed milk are the two essential ingredients. Sprinkles and all that, those are just nice to have. But if you don't have milk or coffee, you don't got a latte. And what I like about it, when a good barista does it, you can't tell where the coffee ends and the milk starts. It's a seamless blend. I really believe the human part of change ought to be blended into what we do, not little, side trips or team building exercises. I mean, those can be okay, but that we're having a phone call or our weekly planning meeting. How are we doing? How are we holding that in a way that actually engages people, and that people don't go, oh no, not another one of those.
Right,
And if we
right.
start looking that way, it actually saves us time because we're using our time better,
Yeah,
And
like
so,
that.
at any rate,
I
that's
love
that's a
that.
big part of what I'm doing.
Yes,
So,
yes, that's your new book is Change Management is like a latte. Something
yeah.
is a lotta like a latte. Awesome. Well, we are at time, so thank you so much, Rick. I think next time I'm gonna ask you to play your trombone. I know you're a musician, so we talked about that. Yeah, and tell us, Rick, how can folks kind of get in your universe? Is there a place that they can go to? And also, what do you recommend in terms of where can people access your books, and what do you recommend for folks that are really
Okay.
looking at this?
Okay. Well, the easiest way to either get in touch with me or see where the resources are, or actually, if you wanted to buy a book, you could, is my website, which is rickmaurer.com. And it's RickMaurer.com. And if people like, I have right now on the website, I have the Seizing Moments of Possibility book. It's only 70 pages, but it's my latest thinking on this stuff. And I have it for free. The ebook is free. But I'm going to be taking that off. And so by the time this goes live, might not be there anymore. And if that happens, just send me an email. Say, hey, I like the free book, and I'll just send you, you know, I'm not going to, move you into a corner and lecture to you
That's
for 10
great.
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've looked at that. It's a great book. It's a great ebook, folks. So, yeah, please take advantage of Rick's offer. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Rick, thank you so much. Is there any last bottom lines, any last best wishes or anything for folks as they're navigating change that you want to share with us?
One last thing, and I got this from psychologist friends of mine, that we need a way to practice what we're going to do safely. And I'm not talking about role plays. I'm not a fan of role plays, but those can work. Case studies are good too. I'm talking about actually getting out there and doing something differently, like engaging people differently. And if it works, great. You can learn from it. If it doesn't work, it wasn't so big that you don't even want to look at it again. And so that makes it a safe emergency. It's real, but if it fails, you go, oh, you know what I forgot was.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
rather than taking this meeting of 150 people and making it all interactive, and you've never done that before, what if you did 10 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
if you did something that you're comfortable with that might still keep you on the edge of your comfort zone? But if it doesn't work, you haven't lost face, and you can go, oh, yeah, here's what went wrong. And I really try to encourage my clients to do that kind of thing, because we don't have a place to practice
Right.
at
Yeah, I
work.
love that.
So
Yeah. And that it's practice. Yeah. That it's dipping our toes into this instead of jumping full throttle into it and then taking the data from that and using it for iterative improvements
yeah,
and this idea of leaning in. Thank you so much, Rick.
oh,
Really
you're welcome.
to have you here. And I look forward to our next conversation. Thanks again.